Chapter 3296. Leave, Jun Jushang said indifferently. Hearing this, the middle-aged man responded, yes. He turned around and walked out. He felt strange. A few days ago, Wanyan Qianhua's family came to pick her up, but she didn't want to leave. Why did she leave in the middle of the night? Could it be that she had a conflict with the sovereign? Also, what was the sovereign's intention? Could it be that he had no feelings for Wanyan Qianhua? Otherwise, why would he let her leave like that? The bamboo forest seemed to have regained its tranquility after the middle-aged man left. Jun Jushang slowly opened his eyes and calmly looked outside. It was unknown what he was thinking about. After a long while, he closed his eyes again and continued to sit cross-legged. The night was getting darker and darker. Wanyan Qianhua was slowly walking down the mountain path of the Xiaoyao sect. Step by step, she didn't have a smile on her face anymore. She didn't need to pretend anymore. That kind of sadness came from her body. Even if she didn't have any expression on her face, people could still feel her sadness. The clouds in the night sky surged. A bolt of lightning flashed across the night sky and lit up half of the night sky. Then, a thunderclap echoed in the sky. At this time, the people of the Xiaoyao sect had already gone to bed. Some of them were cultivating in their rooms. When they heard the thunder, someone walked out of his room and looked at the sky. He was surprised and said, it's going to rain. Why is it suddenly raining? While speaking, he hurriedly went into his room and closed the door. In the bamboo forest, Jun Jushang was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. When he heard the thunder, he opened his eyes. He looked outside and saw that the rain was like needles falling from the night sky. The drops of rain were getting bigger and bigger. They fell to the ground and disappeared into the soil. Looking at the sudden rain, he frowned. This rain was a little strange. The weather was normal during the day, and the wind was gentle. Especially at night it was cool. It shouldn't be raining. Why did it suddenly rain? He stood up and walked outside. He stood at the door and looked at the rain. His eyes moved. No one knew what he was thinking. After a while, he stepped into the rain. He was wearing a white robe. His body was emitting a layer of spiritual power. This layer of spiritual power formed a protective cover that blocked the rain. Even if he didn't open an umbrella, the falling rain couldn't fall on his body. He walked forward. His figure flashed. In the blink of an eye, he was out of the bamboo forest. Because of his fast speed, his boots didn't touch the soil and the rain on the ground. They were still white and flawless. The night wind was blowing, shaking the trees in the forest. The rain was beating against the leaves. When the raindrops fell on the body, it still hurt a little. And in this night, on the mountain path, Wanyan Qianhua did not find a place to hide from the rain, nor did she use anything to block it. She just walked slowly like this, letting the rain beat against her body and blurring her vision. Boom! Another clap of thunder resounded in the night sky. Thunder and lightning flashed in the wind and rain, causing the surroundings to emit a gloomy and cold aura. However, Wanyan Qianhua did not pay any attention to it. He continued to walk forward step by step. Chapter 3297. However, those Yin spirits did not dare to approach her. Instead, they followed her from a distance not far away, as if waiting for an opportunity to strike. Wanyan Qianhua, who was in a daze, did not know that Jun Jushang, who was dressed in white, was standing behind her quietly watching her. The trees hid his figure, and his restrained aura did not alarm her. Looking at the woman who was walking in a sorry state in the rain, Jun Jushang's brows furrowed slightly. His eyes fell on her body, carrying a complicated expression. He watched her walk step by step, allowing the rain to fall on her body. He watched her dress get soaked by the rain, sticking to her body. The hem of her dress was stained with rain and mud on the ground, making her look very sorry. In the past, she was beautiful and charming. He had never seen her in such a sad state. Looking at her like this, he inexplicably felt uncomfortable in his heart. Those ghosts who were following Wanyan Qianhua were startled by Jun Jushang's arrival. They quietly dispersed, not daring to stay. At this time, because the rain was getting heavier, the mountain path was slippery. Wanyan Qianhua was careless, and her weak body slipped. She fell down and sat on the side of the mountain path. Almost at that moment, Jun Jushang instinctively wanted to go forward and support her. However, he did not know what to think, but he retracted his foot. He frowned and looked at her. He watched her sit on the ground for a long time without moving, but her body was slightly swaying. Just when he could not help but want to go forward, he saw her stand up with the help of a nearby tree and continue walking down step by step. Looking at that sorry figure gradually walking away, he looked at her with a complicated expression. He did not leave, but followed her from a distance and followed her all the way. At night, when some wild beasts came out to hunt for food, they noticed him and quietly retreated. Because of this, even in the middle of the night, she did not encounter any attacks from wild beasts. After leaving the mountain path in the forest, she arrived at the foot of the mountain. Because of the pain in her heart and the cold in her body, she finally couldn't take it anymore. She staggered a few steps before her vision turned black and she fainted. Just as she was about to fall, a white figure suddenly appeared and caught her. Jun Jushang looked at the unconscious Wanyan Qianhua with a cold face. He pursed his lips and looked at her with a complicated expression. Then he carried her and walked down the mountain. In the middle of the night, there was a knock on the door of a house at the foot of the mountain. A couple who were sleeping soundly got up and shouted unhappily, "Who is it? What are you doing so late at night?" He walked outside as he spoke, but he didn't open the door. Instead, he peeked through a small crack. The couple was startled when they saw Jun Jushang in white clothes. They hastily opened the door. "Sect leader? Why are you here?" The middle-aged man recognized Jun Jushang. At this moment, he saw him standing at the door with a red-clothed woman in his arms. He hastily invited them in. Jun Jushang walked in with Wanyan Qianhua in his arms. He asked, "Where can we rest?" Chapter 3298. Jun Jushang said to the middle-aged man, "Go and boil the ginger soup. Tell your wife to come here." "Yes, yes." The middle-aged man hurriedly replied and quickly walked out. After a short while the woman came in. "Master, help her change her wet clothes." He looked at the woman and ordered. "Yes." The woman stepped forward to take over the unconscious Wanyan Qianhua. She saw the sect master turn around and close the door. Then, she took off the woman's wet clothes and found a set of clothes that she hadn't worn before. Then, she helped her to the bed and covered her with a quilt. After doing all this, the sweat on her forehead dripped down, but she didn't dare to stay. Instead, she opened the door and said to Jun Jushang outside, "Sect master, this girl has a fever. Her whole body is hot." Jun Jushang came in and checked Wanyan Qianhua's pulse. Then he took out a pill and put it in her mouth. At this time, the middle-aged man's voice could be heard. "Master, the ginger soup is ready. Give it to me. I will bring it in." The woman took the ginger soup and signaled him to wait outside. After all, the woman inside was brought in by the master. Naturally, she couldn't come in casually. "Master, here is the ginger soup." The woman brought the ginger soup to the bedside. Jun Jushang helped Wanyan Qianhua up and held her in his arms. She couldn't open her mouth because she was unconscious. He gently pinched her chin and said to the woman, "Hey." "Yes, yes." The woman scooped a spoonful and carefully fed her. She drank some of the soup, and some of it flowed out from the corner of her mouth. The master took a handkerchief and wiped the corners of her mouth. After feeding her the soup, the woman got up and left. When they were outside, the middle-aged man pulled his wife aside and asked in a low voice, "How is it inside?" "What do you mean, how is it?" "That girl was drenched in the rain and is unconscious. The master is taking care of her." She looked back and said, "I don't know who that girl is. She doesn't look like an ordinary person from the way the master treats her." The middle-aged man had a strange look on his face. "What do you think the master is thinking? The Xiaoyao sect was up there. Why didn't he bring the girl back? Why did you come to our house instead?" "Who knows? All right, go to the front and don't disturb them." The woman pushed him forward, but she was also curious. Inside the room, Jun Jushang helped Wanyan Qianhua to lie down. After helping her pull up the blanket, he sat by the bed and looked at her. His heart was like stone. He had never been moved by any woman, and he didn't understand what love was in this world. Thus, when he saw her so sad, he was very puzzled. He had never given her a good look, so why was she attracted to him? The two of them hadn't spent much time together, and most of the time, he had been cold to her. He had never given her a glimmer of hope, so why would she be moved? Why was her heart tied to him? So much so that he would end up in such a sorry state because of his words. He had said those words to make her realize the difficulties and back off. It was also because it was impossible for the two of them to be together. She was a girl in her prime, and her beauty was unparalleled. When he founded the Xiaoyao sect, her grandfather wasn't even born yet. How could a person like him and a girl like her walk together? Chapter 3299. That night, he stayed by her bedside and put a cold handkerchief on her forehead to cool her down. Her body temperature returned to normal when the sky gradually brightened. He looked at the woman who was sleeping soundly. He stood up and walked out, closing the door behind him. The couple woke up early and made some porridge. They wanted to give it to the sect master and the young lady. Therefore, when they saw Junju Shang, they quickly put down what they were doing and went forward to greet him. Sect master, if she wakes up, tell her that you brought her back to take care of her. Don't mention me to her. Junju Shang looked at them and instructed them. Hearing this, the couple was startled. Seeing that he was still looking at them, they quickly came back to their senses and replied, "Yes, yes." However, they felt strange. Why didn't the sect master let the young lady know? It was obviously the sect master who brought her here. Junju Shang left them some gold coins and left after giving them some instructions. After sending Junju Shang off, the couple looked at each other. In the end, the middle-aged man pushed the woman and said, "Go in and see if the young lady is waking up." "Okay." The woman replied and went in to take a look. She saw that the young lady was still sleeping soundly. Therefore, she walked out quietly. Wanyan Qianhua didn't wake up until noon. When the woman saw her, she quickly went forward and helped her up. She said happily, "Young lady, you're finally awake." Wanyan Qianhua rubbed her temples. She raised her beautiful eyes and looked at the woman. Then, she looked at the room and asked, "Why am I here?" When she spoke, her voice was hoarse and lacked her usual charm. "It was raining heavily last night. You fainted in front of my house. We heard the noise and brought you home." The woman said, "Young lady's clothes were wet last night. I helped you change into a new set of clothes. I washed and dried your clothes. You can wear them later." Then, she poured a cup of water and said, "Young lady, drink some water to moisten your throat. I made some porridge. Eat some to warm your body." Then she walked out. Wanyan Qianhua held the cup and drank water. After drinking the water, she felt her throat moisten a lot. She leaned against the bed and sat down. She still felt a little weak in her body, so she didn't get up. Outside, the middle-aged man watched as the woman scooped the porridge and was about to send it to the back. He asked, "Is that girl awake?" "She's awake." The woman responded and went to the back with the porridge. Seeing this, the middle-aged man said to the woman's back, "Then you stay at home and take care of her. I'm going out to hunt." With a girl at home, it wasn't convenient for a man like him to stay there. It was better for him to go out and hunt for game to add on to the dishes. Inside the room, the woman busily went in and out to serve Wanyan Qianhua. After washing up, she brought the porridge forward and said, "Miss, your body is still weak, so you can't eat anything too oily. Have a bowl of plain porridge first." "Thank you," Wanyan Qianhua said as she took the porridge and ate it herself. The woman sat at the side and watched. Seeing her elegant behavior, her eyes couldn't help but flash. She smiled and said, "Young lady, you were drenched in the rain last night and had a fever. Although the fever has gone down, your body is still weak. My husband and I are the only two people in my house. You should stay here and take care of your body." Wanyan Qianhua knew that she was weak and couldn't leave even if she wanted to, so she said, "I'll have to trouble you." Chapter 3300. Wanyan Qianhua didn't refuse. She felt weak all over. After eating, she lay down. She heard the woman quietly walk out and close the door. The entire room quieted down. She lay on the bed and quietly looked at the ceiling. Only when she was tired did she fall into a deep sleep. She recuperated here until 3 days later when she felt much better. Then she finally walked out of the room. She had stayed in the room for the past few days. When she suddenly came out and saw the blazing sun in the sky, she couldn't help but squint. "Miss, how do you feel today?" The woman saw her come out and hurriedly asked. Wanyan Qianhua revealed a smile. She looked at the woman and said, "I've troubled you these past few days. Now that my body has recovered, it's time to leave." As she spoke, she took out a bottle of medicinal pills from her sleeve. "You are all cultivators. There are a few medicinal pills in here that can help you advance. Consider it my repayment for your care these past few days." The middle-aged man standing to the side saw this, and hurriedly waved his hand. "You can't accept this, you can't accept this. How can we accept this? They took care of her under the sect master's orders. How could they take her things? This wasn't appropriate." "That's right, Mississippi. Take it back. These medicinal pills are precious. We can't accept them." The woman didn't dare to accept them. Wanyan Qianhua smiled and said, "Take it. These are no longer of any use to me. I'll just do you a favor." As she spoke, she stuffed the bottle of medicinal pills into the woman's hands. Then she said to the two, "Farewell." With that she walked out. When the couple saw this, they couldn't help but look at each other. The two of them followed her out. They watched her figure gradually disappear into the distance. When she disappeared from their sight, the woman said, "Will it work if you give us medicinal pills?" The middle-aged man thought for a moment and said, "Take it. When the sect master comes, just let him know." On the other side, Wanyan Qianhua, who had left, did not return to the Wanyan family, nor did she return to the sect. Instead, she went to the extremely dangerous training forest to train. She left for a few years, and no one heard any news of her. Elder Mei, who had been with Du Fan and the others, had not seen Fengjiu and the others since he woke up. There was no news of Howe either. Even when he asked Du Fan and the others, they were unwilling to tell him. One day, after finishing his work, Old Mei looked at the sky and sighed softly. He shook his head and walked toward the front yard. When he heard the sound of a zither, he was startled. Then he headed toward the back of the mountain. When he arrived at the back of the mountain, he saw Qin Xan practicing the guqin. He stood not far away and waited, watching and listening. Qin Xan stopped practicing after one song and looked at Elder Mei. She might have sensed his arrival. "What's the matter, Elder Mei?" she asked, looking at him with some confusion. Elder Mei thought for a moment and walked forward. He sighed and said, "Qin Xan, you should know where they went, right? I'm not an outsider. Why didn't you tell me?" When she heard this, Qin Xan said indifferently, "Master only told me that they were going to cultivate in seclusion. However, she didn't mention where they were going. I didn't ask either." Chapter 3301. Upon hearing this, Elder Mei was slightly surprised. He did not expect Qin Xan to be more open-minded than he was. She even trusted Fengjiu unconditionally. For a moment his face reddened. He was an old man, but he was not as clear-headed as a young girl. Thinking of this, he inexplicably let out a sigh of relief. The breath that had been in his heart since he woke up seemed to have dissipated at this moment. He smiled and said, "You're right. I was thinking too much. You can continue practicing your guqin. I'll go back first." After saying this, he turned and left. Qin Xan saw that his footsteps were much lighter than before. Only then did she retract her gaze. She placed her hands on the strings of the guqin and gently plucked the strings. For a moment, the melodious sound of the guqin spread through the back of the mountain. It was sometimes light and sometimes sharp. Time was like quicksand between one's fingers. If one said it was fast, it was not fast. If one said it was slow, it was hard to grasp. The scenes of the past seemed to have happened yesterday. However, when one carefully thought about it, one would realize that 5 years had passed unknowingly. In these 5 years, the upper world was not at peace. The first 3 years were considered peaceful, and there were no major events or disturbances. However, in the recent 2 years, various forces began to move in secret. In just 2 years, the forces of the Devil Lord, the forces of the Sovereign Tongtian, and the forces of the Black Tortoise formed a 3-legged cauldron. They divided the territory, and each ruled as a king. Compared to other forces, these 3 forces could be said to be the largest and most feared. However, they did not stop gathering forces. Instead, they began to rope in other forces. Compared to the devil cultivators and the sovereign Tongtian, who killed those who disobeyed them, the sovereign Tongtian, who was righteous, won the support of many righteous cultivators. Now that there was turmoil everywhere, the situation was becoming more and more oppressive. However, these people seemed to have forgotten about Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu, who had disappeared for 5 years. This year, at the Immortal Sect's Immortal Ascension stairs, another person walked out in the middle of the night. This person had a strong waist and a bear's back. He was dressed in a black robe and held a large saber in his hand. His entire person exuded an awe-inspiring aura. He was none other than Guan Shilin, who had been cultivating in the mortal world for many years. Right now, he had relied on his own strength to climb the Immortal Ascension stairs and arrived in the upper realm where his younger sister was. Therefore, the moment he descended the Immortal Ascension stairs, he began to ask around for information. Who would have thought that they had actually disappeared from this place for 5 years? When they arrived at Sifang City, Guan Shilin frowned. He knew that they would encounter a lot of trouble on their way here. But he didn't expect that even their enemies would be so powerful that they disappeared without a trace. Would they be in danger? Instinctively, he didn't think so. Based on his understanding of Fengjiu, they should be cultivating somewhere to increase their strength. However, he was rather surprised that they were able to live in seclusion for 5 years without knowing anything about the world. He wondered when they would return. I wonder what level of strength they've reached now. Now that they had returned, they shouldn't have to fear anyone in this world anymore, right? Thinking of this, his heart was burning with excitement. He couldn't help but look forward to the day when he would meet them again. Chapter 3302. In these 5 years, many people had changed. Wanyan Qianhua, who had disappeared for 5 years, had become famous in the past few months because he had single-handedly destroyed a base of demonic cultivators and killed thousands of demonic cultivators. Everyone knew about him. Her strength had increased a lot in these 5 years. She was still dressed in red and was still a lazy and seductive beauty. However, she was also known as a cold-blooded and heartless ice beauty. When Jun Jueshang, who was in the Xiaorao sect, heard the news about her single-handedly destroying thousands of demonic cultivators, Jun Jueshang practiced his swordsmanship for an entire day in the bamboo forest. In Danwang Valley, Xianyuan Mose, who was dressed in a black robe, was standing with his hands behind his back. He was looking at the little figure practicing his swordsmanship on the grass in front of him. When his deep black eyes fell on the figure, there was admiration and affection. Hao who was already 6 years old, was skillfully practicing his swordsmanship. His delicate and outstanding little face already had a maturity and experience that was different from ordinary children. At this moment, he was practicing his swordsmanship seriously. His delicate little face was tense, and his little lips were pursed. His face was full of coldness, and he looked somewhat similar to Xianyuan Mose. It was not the appearance that was similar, but the expression that was somewhat similar to his. After he finished practicing a set of swordsmanship, he stopped and put the sword in his hand behind his back. He walked towards Xianyuan Mose and respectfully bowed. He called out, "Father." Although he kept a straight face and tried his best to make himself look more mature, the light in his eyes still made people feel that it was funny. The person in front of them was a child, but he was pretending to be an adult. It looked a little funny. Xianyuan Mose looked at the child, who was hoping to be praised by him, and nodded. He said, "You've improved since yesterday. Not bad." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the child in front of him finally break into a smile. He no longer pulled a long face and went forward to hug his father's leg, unable to hide his joy as he said, "Father, Hao will definitely work harder. Hao will also work hard to cultivate and become stronger, so that I can protect you and mother in the future." Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose's lips curved slightly, revealing a faint smile, but his tone was still cold. "You're already so old, you have to stand properly. You're a boy, so you can't act like a spoiled girl. You have to learn to take responsibility." Hearing this, Hao hurriedly let go of his hand and stood up straight, looking up at him. Yes, Hao knows. Hao doesn't dare to forget father's teachings. Today's sword training will end here. Go learn alchemy. Study hard, study hard. I'll ask you how you're doing later, Xianyuan Mo said as his gaze fell on Hao. Yes, he responded and was about to run away. But when he thought of his father's daily teachings, he immediately bowed respectfully and left. Just as he was about to leave, he saw Dan Wang in a white robe walking over with a smile. Hao hurriedly called out, "Grandfather." "Haha, Hao is going to learn alchemy. Go, go. Study hard," Dan Wang said with a smile. After Hao came forward, he gently patted Hao's head to let him go. Goodbye, grandfather." Hao responded and bowed to him before leaving. "Why is Dan Wang here?" Xianyuan Mose looked at the old man walking over and asked. Chapter 3303. Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose only said, "I'm doing this for his own good. He's not an ordinary person, so naturally, he can't grow up carefree like an ordinary child. Being strict is only a good thing for him. In the future, this will save his life in dangerous situations." That's true, but this child is still so young. Dan Wang couldn't bear to part with him. That child was lively and mischievous when he was young. But since he was 2 or 3 years old, he had been teaching him strictly. That child was also someone who could endure hardships. Whatever they said he would do. Although he was young, he was already very capable. In the future, as long as Aju's child is a boy, I will teach him like this. Moreover, I will be even stricter, Xianyuan Mo said slowly. He didn't feel that he had done anything wrong. As long as the child had the ability to protect himself, they could be at ease. Hao would face many dangers in the future. He was just making preparations in advance to teach him how to deal with them. When Dan Wang heard this, he couldn't help but smile and ask, "What about the girl?" Hearing Dan Wang's words, Xianyuan Mo's expression softened. It was as if he was already imagining what his and Aju's daughter would look like. Immediately, a smile overflowed on his face. He said, "A girl naturally has to be well protected. Of course, she has to learn to be capable. Yes, if it's a girl, I will keep her by my side and hold her in the palm of my hand. I won't let anyone hurt her." Daughters were not like sons. Daughters had to be pampered, especially his and Aju's daughter. When the time came, she would definitely be very cute and delicate. As her father, he naturally had to protect her well. Dan Wang looked at Xianyuan Mose, who was already daydreaming, and couldn't help but shake his head. He smiled and said, "It's too early to talk about it now. You're not married yet." As he spoke, he coughed softly and asked, "That girl hasn't broken through yet?" "It should be soon," Xianyuan Mose said as he looked at the cave abode. In the past 5 years, the two of them had been cultivating most of the time. They had also advanced one after another. This time, he had advanced to the Divine King level before her. She had been in seclusion for a long time, but had not broken through yet. However, counting the days, she should have broken through during this period of time. They had been here for 5 years, waiting for her to successfully break through before leaving Dan Wang Valley. Although they didn't go out in the past 5 years, they knew the outside world like the back of their hands. Every once in a while, Du Fan would report the outside world to them. Because of this, they knew that the world was in chaos. The few people around you should have come out of seclusion in the next few days. Although each of them has the help of medicinal pills, your advancement is really frightening. Dan Wang shook his head and said with a smile, "In this valley, there are only a few freaks like you. 5 years is not a short time." As Xianyuan Mo spoke, he looked at King of Pills and said, "We can't continue to stay here either. There's a storm brewing outside, and it's time to go out. I just don't know how strong our enemies have become in these 5 years." Hearing this, Dan Wang didn't say anything. He just stroked his beard and remained silent. 5 years was enough to change a lot. As for how to change it, that was their business. Chapter 3304. After watching Dan Wang leave, Xianyuan Mo stood in silence for a while before leaving as well. Now, all they could do was wait for Fengjiu to come out of seclusion. Due to the competition between the various factions, Sovereign Tongtian had set his sights on the 4 great sects and schools. He had sent people to the sects to persuade them to submit to him. Otherwise, what awaited them would be the destruction of their sects. Because of this, the leaders of the various sects felt that dark clouds were looming over their heads and were extremely worried. Just as the leaders of the various sects were discussing and were about to ask Sovereign Tongtian for help, they received another piece of news. Sovereign Tongtian had plotted against Sovereign Tongtian and was currently unable to fend for himself. In the sects, CK and Mu Xian sat below and quietly listened to the discussions between the leaders and elders of the various sections. Seeing them frowning and sighing from time to time, the two of them looked at each other with worry in their eyes. Sovereign Skirich was not a heretical cultivator, nor was he a devil cultivator, nor was he a cultivator of the righteous path. He had his eyes on the great sects, and if they didn't submit to him, they would definitely be destroyed. With the strength of the various sects, even if they had disciples all over the place, what could they do? No matter how many people they had, they would not be as strong as Sovereign Tongtian. One had to know that he alone was enough to destroy a sect. The two of them lowered their eyes and thought to themselves, 5 years have passed, where is our master now? If they were here, perhaps there would be a solution? Thinking of this, the two of them secretly shook their heads. How could there be a solution? Although their master's strength was outstanding, it was impossible for him to reach the Divine King level in 5 years. The strength of a Divine King was not something that anyone could withstand, even if they had an ancient divine beast. Given the current situation, what do you think we should do? One of the leaders asked as he looked at the crowd. Sigh. One of the sect masters sighed and said, we had placed all our hopes on Sovereign Black Tortoise. Now that we heard that Sovereign Black Tortoise was ambushed, I'm afraid no one has the ability to fight against Sovereign Tongtian. Yes, what we're afraid of is facing Sovereign Tongtian. If he doesn't appear, it'll be fine. But if he does, I'm afraid we won't be his match. Everyone said one sentence after another. At this point they fell silent again. No one had a good idea. However, right at this moment, one of the sect leaders looked at the crowd and said, everyone, do you still remember the prophecy of Elder Tianji? Tianji Zi. Everyone was stunned. They looked at each other and pondered for a moment. Is it because of what he said? He was referring to Fengjiu. However, she had disappeared for 5 years, and there was no news of her at all. Regardless of whether she appeared or not, even if she did, how strong could she have become in 5 years? No matter how strong he is, I'm afraid he can't compare to Sovereign Tongtian. That's true, but since she is the chosen one, she must have her own strengths. Moreover, I heard that the Holy Prince from the Holy Temple will be coming out soon. Another elder said, looking at the crowd. It's impossible for us to submit to Sovereign Tongtian. Since that's the case, we can only give it our all. Chapter 3305. At this point, one of the sect leaders looked at CK and Mu Xian and asked, you two are Fengjiu's disciples. Have you really not heard anything about them in the past 5 years? CK and Mu Xian looked at each other and smiled bitterly. When the two masters left, they didn't tell us where they were going, so we really don't know their whereabouts. We also don't have any news about them. Even if they did, they wouldn't have dared to leak any information about them without their master's permission. Hearing their words, the crowd thought for a moment and didn't say anything more. Instead, they discussed among themselves. If we want to fight against the Sovereign of Sky Reaching, then the 4 major sects and the 4 major factions must join forces. When we return to our respective sects, we can send the weaker disciples back to their respective clans and leave the stronger disciples behind to fight. This will reduce the number of casualties. Hearing this, the crowd nodded. That was true. If the weaker disciples participated in this battle, they would only end up dying. They naturally hoped that there would be some seedlings left in their sects and didn't want the entire sect to be destroyed. Another thing is, we can spread the news and invite all the strong cultivators to fight this battle with us. I believe that there are many strong cultivators from all over the world. As long as we spread the news, there will definitely be people who will come to help us. That's fine. The crowd nodded in agreement. Another thing is, we can send someone to the Divine Temple and ask the people there to help us. CK and Mu Xian listened quietly and watched as they discussed. In the end, Everything was settled and the sect leaders and elders left. They were about to leave when the sect leader called out to them. "Wait a moment, you two." The sect leader walked over with his hands behind his back and called out to them. "Sect leader." The two turned around and bowed to him, asking, "Is there anything else you want us to do, sect leader?" The sect leader looked at them deeply and said, "Do you know why the other venerables didn't participate in this discussion, but the two of you did?" Hearing this, their eyes flickered and they understood. However, they didn't say much and only cupped their hands and said, "Please tell us, sect leader." Seeing this, the sect leader sighed. "You don't have to play dumb with me. I'm sure you know my intentions. You heard what I said just now. I won't say anything else. Think about it carefully." With that, he walked out, leaving the two behind. When he came closer, Mu Exine looked at CK and said, "Sect leader, you want us to inform Master?" CK smiled bitterly. "What else could it be? Although we say that we don't have news, sect leader, we don't. Even though we don't know anything about Master, we know how to contact Master and the others." Speaking of this, CK sighed. "In the past 5 years, although we have the Master's communication jade tablet, we haven't used it even once. This time, the sect master has said so, and the matter is indeed not small. No matter what, we should report to the masters. As for whether they will come back or not, it will depend on the two masters." Chapter 3306. After the people from the various sects returned to their sects, they quickly arranged the matters in their sections. At the same time, they spread the news and invited powerful cultivators from all over to prepare for the battle with Sovereign Tongtian. The gathering place was the Blue Star Immortal Sect. Once the news spread, it caused a huge uproar everywhere. After some people heard the news, they strengthened the guards of their own families and were on high alert. Some people brought their families to other places to avoid the big thing that was about to happen. Although there were many powerful cultivators from all over the place, after the news spread, very few cultivators went to Four Corner City and the Blue Star Immortal Sect. Some people had extraordinary strength, but because they had family members, they could not leave. Their family members did not want them to face such a powerful cultivator and experience such a battle that would definitely kill them. However, there were some cultivators who were alone and had no worries. They went to the Blue Star Immortal Sect to prepare to help. There were also cultivators who wanted to take advantage of this matter to make a name for themselves, and went to the Blue Star Immortal Sect. After hearing the news, Dufan and the others did not do anything else. They only paid attention to the movements of all parties. In the past 5 years, they had expanded and established an extraordinary force in the upper realm. In the open, there were a few large sections. In the dark, the power of Yin Dian was enough to cover all forces, causing all parties to be wary. However, in the past 5 years, the people of Yin Dian had appeared and disappeared mysteriously. No one could find out about them, let alone whether they were good or evil. In Four Corner City, Guanxilin drank wine and ate meat. He narrowed his eyes as he listened to the discussions of the people in the restaurant. He ate the last piece of soy sauce meat on his plate, burped, wiped his mouth and shouted, "Waiter, the bill." His deep voice was full of energy, causing some people who had not noticed him to look at him and size him up. Someone asked, "Brother, are you going to the Blue Star Immortal Sect?" Guanxilin glanced at the man and said, "Nope." He glanced at the waiter who was trotting over. After asking how much it was, he stood up and paid the bill. Just as he was about to leave, the cultivator's voice was heard again. "And here I thought you were some kind of hero. Turns out you're just a coward. Ha 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 ha. Brother Lee, you think too highly of him. Look, he only has brute force. He's just a mystic. How can he compare to us?" A cultivator at the same table laughed and looked at Guanxilin mockingly. "That's right. If such a person were to go, he would most likely be killed. It's no wonder that he doesn't dare to go," another cultivator said as he cast a contemptuous glance at Guanxilin. Hearing their words, the people in the restaurant couldn't help but hold their breaths. The strength of these people could be considered strong. It was said that they were experts who answered the call to go to the Blue Star Immortal Sect to help. In the past 2 days, they had already caused a lot of trouble. Many cultivators who couldn't bear it any longer were seriously injured after fighting with them. In this place, their names had also spread. However, it wasn't a good reputation. It was just a bad reputation for bullying the weak. The people in the restaurant looked at the burly man and couldn't help but gulp. The burly man had a biting cold aura. Only a few people dared to provoke someone like him. Although he was a mystic, he was still enough to make people wary. Chapter 3307. A cold light flashed through Guanxilin's eyes as he looked at the leg that was stretched out to trip him. He acted as if he didn't see it and took a step forward. However, he didn't step over it, but instead stepped on the leg that was stretched out horizontally. Crack! Hiss! When the sound of bones breaking rang out, the cultivator's shrill scream also rang out, causing everyone in the restaurant to feel their hearts skip a beat. My foot! My foot! You actually dared to break my foot! The cultivator's face was pale, and beads of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. He trembled as he retracted his foot. But at this time, the pain from the broken leg was so great that it couldn't bear any more force. When everyone in the restaurant saw this scene, they couldn't help but gasp. How dare this man? How dare he break that person's foot? This time he's in trouble. As if they could already foresee the man's miserable end, the people in the restaurant couldn't help but secretly shake their heads. Wouldn't it be fine if he endured it for a while? Now it was hard to say if this man could even keep his life. Guanxilin didn't even look at him. After stepping on the cultivator's foot, he continued to walk forward. He didn't even frown. It was as if he didn't step on the cultivator's foot, but on the ground. He wanted to leave, but how could the two cultivators who had regained their senses let him go? They immediately stood up angrily and shouted, "Stop right there!" With a vicious shout, a palm wind was sent towards Guanxilin's back. Guanxilin easily dodged without even looking back. He didn't want to fight in the restaurant and cause the owner of the restaurant to lose his business. Thus he moved and went down the stairs. Seeing Guanxilin go to the first floor, the cultivators' faces were as cold as ice, especially the cultivator whose foot was broken. He said to the two cultivators in a sinister tone, "It's fine if this person doesn't respect me, but he doesn't respect the two of you. How hateful." Although the two cultivators were trying to sow discord, that person didn't even look at them before going downstairs. The contempt in his actions towards them had truly infuriated them, especially since they had been humiliated in front of so many people in the restaurant. If they didn't do anything, how could they become famous in the future? Thinking of this, they heavily snorted. This brat has no respect for anyone. Let's see how we'll teach him a lesson he'll never forget. As they spoke, the two of them followed the man down the stairs. They saw that the man didn't approach them and was instead walking out from the first floor. At that moment, the two of them looked at each other and simultaneously attacked the man in black in front of them. When the people on the first floor saw the fight, they couldn't help but stand up and retreat to the side. However, the man in black didn't even look back and took a step forward. His speed was so fast that he easily avoided the attacks of the two cultivators behind him, causing them to hit nothing but air. In a flash, the man in black was already out of the restaurant. Seeing this scene, the owner's eyes flashed, and his gaze fell on Guanxilin. Outside, the people on the street saw the two cultivators chasing after him and automatically dodged. At this moment, the man who had been dodging and not fighting back finally raised his hand and caught the other cultivator's fist. His hand bent down and the sound of bones breaking rang out. Ah! Chapter 3308. Bang! His body fell heavily to the ground, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. The man struggled to stand up, but he fell back to the ground after supporting himself. Seeing this, the other person drew his sword from his waist and swung it at Guanxilin. However, the seemingly ferocious strike was like a child playing with a sword in Guanxilin's eyes. Guanxilin did not even look at it. He dodged to the side, and as he dodged the attack, he raised his hand and clenched it into a fist. His fist was imbued with a hidden force as it landed on the area between the man's thumb and index finger. With a miserable shriek, the man's sword fell to the ground. He quickly covered his hand and retreated, His face was filled with shock as he looked at the black-robed man. Who are you? Tell me your name if you have the guts. The cultivator looked at him in horror, but he still shouted fiercely. He wanted to know his name, as if he wanted to settle the score with him in the future. Guan Shilin glanced at the man. Then his gaze swept across the man on the ground, and the pale-faced cultivator, who was standing in front of the restaurant, and was about to sneak away. Suddenly, he strode forward and pulled the man out with one hand. What's the use of keeping your cultivation for a vicious person like you? As soon as he finished speaking, he crippled the cultivator's cultivation. Ah, no. The cultivator screamed in horror. However, his opponent was too fast. He only felt the strength leave his body in an instant. His limbs went limp, and he fell to the ground. Seeing this, the other two people's faces turned pale. A sense of fear rose from the bottom of their hearts, causing them to involuntarily shiver. They instinctively wanted to escape, and they did so. The man who was punched by Guan Shilin turned around and took a few steps forward, but Guan Shilin had already pulled him back. He also crippled his cultivation and threw him to the side. Don't cripple my cultivation. I apologize to you. I apologize, I won't dare to do it again. The person sitting on the bed said in a trembling voice. Because he had been kicked, he hadn't recovered yet. Seeing him walk over step by step, he was so scared that he peed in his blanket. The surrounding people stared at the black-robed man in surprise. They watched as he stepped forward and crippled that person's cultivation. It was fine if he didn't make a move, but when he made a move, he crippled those three people's cultivation. Such a straightforward and decisive method caused everyone's hearts to tremble. This person was definitely not a fish in a pond. After Guan Shilin crippled their cultivation, he did not pay any more attention to them. This kind of person had offended too many people. Now that his cultivation had been crippled, it was unknown if he would be able to leave Four Corner City alive. He turned around and left, walking along the main street. During this period of time, he had been gathering information in Four Corner City. Now that he had gathered enough information, it was time to find a place to stay. As for where it was naturally his younger sister's Feng Manor. Because he had inquired about the place during this period of time, he followed the main street and headed towards the Feng Manor. He did not stop. However, because he had crippled those three people's cultivation in front of the restaurant, quite a few families in the city had already noticed him. Thus, when the people following him saw him arrive in front of the Feng Manor's gate, they could not help but be stunned. Chapter 3309. What? You're saying that someone actually went into the Feng Manor? When the Xiao family's head heard the news, he could not help but frown and ask, what kind of person is that? Do you know his background? Ever since Fengjiu and the others left 5 years ago, there had been no one living there. However, he had ordered people to go to the Feng Manor every once in a while to clean it up. He had also sent people to secretly monitor the Feng Manor, hoping that Fengjiu and the others would one day return. However, 5 years had passed, and there had been no news of them at all. He never thought that he would hear that someone had actually entered the manor today. That person was truly audacious. Family head, that person was wearing black clothes. He had a sturdy waist and a bear's back. He didn't seem to be 30 years old, but his strength was outstanding. He crippled the cultivation of 3 flying immortals on the street. Furthermore, that man was not a spirit cultivator, but a profound cultivator. His aura was outstanding, and he did not seem like an ordinary person. As the hidden guard reported this, he thought of the person he had seen earlier. He was only a profound cultivator, but he had extraordinary strength. Furthermore, he dared to cripple the cultivation of 3 flying immortals by himself. That person's methods and style were indeed not something an ordinary person could compare to. Hearing this, the Xiao family's head pondered for a while before saying, it seems that I really need to go and see just what kind of person he is. The other family clans also knew about the news that the Xiao family had received. They did not pay much attention to the Feng Manor that had been abandoned for 5 years. After all, Fengjiu and the others had disappeared for 5 years. It was hard to say whether or not they would appear again. The reason they paid attention to this place was because of the recent turmoil in the world. Naturally, the movements in the city could not be hidden from the spies they had sent out, especially today's matter. That profound cultivator had crippled 3 flying immortals by himself. His strength could not be underestimated. They were naturally curious about this person's background. After entering the Feng Manor, the people from the Xiao family will definitely go and see what's going on. Just send someone to secretly keep an eye on him. If there's any movement, report back immediately, one of the family heads ordered, having his subordinates continue to keep an eye on him. At the same time, the people from the other families and factions did as they were told. Some people were even thinking that this person had to go to the Feng Manor of all places. Could it be that he had some sort of relationship with Fengjiu? At the same time, inside the Feng Manor, Guan Shilin went in to take a look. Seeing that the manor was clean and tidy, it was as if someone often cleaned it, thus he nodded to himself. He had heard that the Xiao family would send people to clean up every once in a while. It seemed to be true. He looked around the mansion and couldn't help but smile. So we're here. Xiao Jiao and the others live here. The environment is not bad. He walked around the entire residence, and indeed, there was not a single person. Moreover, the main door was not locked, so who would dare to come in here? Not to mention the fact that the Xiao family's people were secretly watching over the place. Even if someone really did not know what was good for them, and came in, they would have to weigh their own strength. He did not come here for a reason. He just thought that if Xiao Jiao and the others came back in the future, they would definitely come back here. Since he did not know where to find them, then he would let them come find him. During this period of time, he had asked around and heard that the Yin Hall's underground forces were here. Thinking about it, it should be Hui Lang and the others, right? Now that he was here, he figured that it would not be long before they contacted him. Chapter 33:10. Who dares to occupy the Feng Manor? Just as Guan Shilin was about to go rest, he heard this and laughed. Thinking about it, this person should be someone from the Xiao family. They came quite quickly. He adjusted his expression, turned around and walked out. Outside, he saw a middle-aged man in luxurious clothes standing in the front yard with his hands behind his back. Behind him were several guards. Looking at his aura, he should be the head of the Xiao family. This is the head of the Xiao family? Guan Shilin asked. Although he asked, he was somewhat certain. He just didn't expect the head of the Xiao family to care so much about this place. Hearing Guan Shilin's words, the head of the Xiao family's expression changed slightly. He asked in a deep voice, "Who are you? Why did you enter the Feng Manor? Do you know that the Feng Manor has a master?" Hearing this, Guan Shilin smiled. "Head of the Xiao family, please come in and sit." As if he was the host, he made an inviting gesture. Then, without waiting for the head of the Xiao family to take a step, he walked in first. Seeing this, the head of the Xiao family frowned. He stared at the person's back for a while, but in the end he followed in. In the main hall, he saw Guan Shilin sitting in the main seat. The head of the Xiao family could not help but frown. His eyes were filled with anger. "You really think you're the master of this place?" Guan Shilin smiled and said, "Head of the Xiao family, there's no need to be angry. I haven't introduced myself yet." He looked at him and smiled. "My surname is Guan, and my name is Shilin. I'm Fengjiu's older brother." Hearing this, the head of the Xiao family was shocked. After calming down, he snorted heavily and looked at Guan Shilin with a dark expression. "Why don't you find a better excuse to lie? What do you mean you're Fengjiu's older brother? Fengjiu's surname is Feng, and your surname is Guan. How can you say you're her older brother?" Guan Shilin was not angry. He only smiled and said, "I am her older brother, but I'm just a foster brother. I'm not her biological brother." "Just because you say so, do you think I believe you?" The head of the Xiao family said in a deep voice. He looked at him coldly. "Why would I lie to you?" Guan Shilin shook his head and said with a smile, "I only came here a while ago by climbing the celestial ascension stairs from the lower realm. Because I didn't have any news about them, I stayed in the city for a few days and asked around. Only today did I decide to come to the Feng Manor." Hearing this, the Xiao family's master frowned slightly and stared at him without saying a word. I'm not asking you to believe me, but since you're here, I have to tell you that I'm staying here to wait for them to come back. Master Xiao stared at him for a long time and asked, How can I believe that you're Fengjiu's elder brother? Guan Shilin smiled. What does Master Xiao want to know? Someone close to my sister. There are some things that even if I told you, you wouldn't know, so there's no need to say it. However, even if my sister doesn't come back, the person close to her will come back soon. At that time, Master Xiao will know that I'm telling the truth. Hearing this, Master Xiao thought for a bit and said, Okay, since that's the case, I'll believe you for now. However, this place has been abandoned for 5 years. Although I've ordered people to clean it up, there aren't any servants in the manor. It's inconvenient for you to stay here. Why don't you come to the Xiao Manor and stay for a few days? Hearing this, Guan Shilin smiled and said, There's no need. I'll just stay here. Chapter 33:11. Then I'll go back and pick some servants to send over. Since we're going to stay, it's inevitable that there will be some servants moving around. As he spoke, he stood up and cupped his hands. Farewell. Guan Shilin returned the salute. After sending him out, he went to the backyard and found a place to rest. After he left, an old man next to him asked, Family head, do you really believe what he said? You don't believe him? The Xiao family head looked at the old man. Not really. I saw that this person's aura is not ordinary. He doesn't seem like the kind of person who wants to take advantage of others, or has some ulterior motive. Perhaps he really does have some relationship with young Miss Feng. If it's really as he said, then someone will come in a few days. That's a good thing. The Xiao family head nodded. That's right. This person is young, but he has the aura of someone in a high position. His every movement has an intimidating aura. He's quite similar to them. As for Fengjiu and the others, Xianyuan Mo's and Fengjiu didn't need to be said. Even Leng Hua and the others by their side didn't seem like servants. Instead, they seemed like sons of aristocratic families. Thus, after seeing Guan Shilin, he believed most of it. However, what the Xiao family didn't expect was that they didn't have to wait for a few days. As soon as the sky darkened, someone quietly snuck into the Feng Manor. Guan Shilin, who was resting in the courtyard, heard the commotion and opened his eyes in the darkness. He sat up and said, Come in if you're here. Just as he finished speaking, 2 black figures jumped in through the window. The lights in the room lit up, and the 3 people in the room secretly looked around. Guan Shilin originally thought that it would be Leng Hua and the others, who knew that it would be 2 masked men in black. Seeing the masks on their faces, he grinned and leaned against the bed. People from Yandian? Greetings, Master Guan. The 2 people looked at Guan Shilin, then respectfully cupped their hands and bowed. Who sent you? Hui Lang? Or is it Leng Hua? Or is it Du Fan? As he asked, he stared at their masks. He thought to himself that the masks worn by the people from Yandian were exactly the same as before. However, to be able to wear masks, they should be people with some status in Yandian. At most, the people below them. It's Manager Du sent us. One of them said. Steward Du and the others knew that Lord Guan came here, so they ordered us to secretly inquire about the news. Where are they? Are they not in Four Square City? Asked Guan Shilin to ask. They're not in Four Corner City, but they'll be here in a few days. Hearing this, Guan Shilin turned to find. Since you know I'm here, that's enough. You can go back. Tell them that I'll be waiting for them here. If they were coming back, then little 9 and the others should be coming back soon. Yes. The 2 responded, but didn't leave immediately. Instead, they said, Master Guan, if you have any instructions, you can go to today's restaurant and find the manager. This is a token. One of them handed over a token. Hearing that it was today's restaurant, Guan Shilin raised his eyebrows and nodded. He reached out and took the token. Yes, I understand. We'll take our leave. The 2 people left in a flash. Chapter 33:12. In a town, Wanyan Qianhua, dressed in a red dress, reclined on the 2nd floor of a restaurant. She gently swirled a wine cup in her hand as she looked at the people coming and going below with her mesmerizing and seductive gaze. She would occasionally take a sip of wine, She lazily reclined there, and a seductive aura naturally emanated from her body. Her every movement was filled with a seductive aura, causing the people in the restaurant to involuntarily stare at her. Who is that woman? She's so beautiful. A cultivator could not hide the astonishment in his eyes. His gaze was fixed on the red figure. Looking at that exquisite and graceful figure, he felt as if there were feathers gently brushing against his heart. It was difficult to resist. I've never seen her before. She should be a foreigner, a cultivator beside him said. A cultivator at the side said. He saw that the woman in the red dress didn't seem to notice the burning gazes of the crowd. She continued to drink her wine and lay by the window like a cat. He couldn't help but have the guts to be lustful. It's rare to meet such a beauty. I'll go over and invite her to drink with me. The man could not help but stand up and walk towards the woman. Miss, how can it be fun to drink alone? Why don't you accompany us? As the man spoke, he leaned forward slightly. He could faintly smell the faint fragrance of the woman's body, and he felt his heart ripple. Scram! Wanyan Qianhua's red lips parted slightly and spat out a cold word. However, she did not even turn her head. Instead, she brought the wine cup closer to her red lips and took a sip. She continued to lie there and look at the street outside. Being told to scram by a woman like this, the man felt a little embarrassed, and his expression changed slightly, especially when he saw the crowd looking in their direction. He mustered up his courage and stepped forward. As he spoke, he reached out to grab Wanyan Qianhua's hand. However, at that moment, Wanyan Qianhua, who was originally looking at the street outside, turned her head. Her seductive gaze swept over with a cold glint, and she released her pressure. She did not even touch that person, but that person's face paled, and he abruptly took a few steps back. He groaned and spat out a mouthful of blood. Pfft! In the end, he could not even stand up and fell down. His face was pale and filled with shock as he looked at the beautiful woman who was staring coldly at him. His heart was in turmoil, and he was shocked beyond words. Seeing this scene, the crowd's hearts also shook violently. They all looked at the beautiful woman in red at the same time with unconcealable shock on their faces. This woman had actually used her pressure to push that cultivator away and make him vomit blood? For a moment, the way everyone looked at her had changed. The amazement in their eyes had turned into fear, contemplation, and inquiry. Everyone looked at her quietly. She was dressed in red and had an outstanding temperament. The first person that came to mind was Fengjiu. However, the moment this thought appeared, they secretly shook their heads and rejected it. It shouldn't be Fengjiu. Although they had never seen Fengjiu before, they had heard that it was an absolutely beautiful woman with a face that could topple cities. Her beauty was cold and aloof. The woman in front of them was also extremely beautiful, but it was not the kind of beauty that was cold and aloof. She was alluring, beautiful, and extraordinary. Such a person could not be Fengjiu. However, she also liked to wear red. Then who could she be? Chapter 33:13. Suddenly, someone slapped his head and exclaimed, I know who she is. Everyone turned to look at the man with wide eyes and asked in a low voice, Who is she? Who is she? If she's not the ghost Dr. Fengjiu, then she must be Wanyan Qianhua. Yes, she must be Wanyan Qianhua. Once this was said, some people showed a look of understanding while others were puzzled. However, when they looked at the woman, they saw that she acted as if nothing had happened and continued to drink her wine. Brat, it's good that you're still alive. Do you know who Wanyan Qianhua is? She killed thousands of demonic cultivators by herself, and you dare to provoke her? You must be tired of living. Hearing this, those who didn't know couldn't help but gasp. She killed thousands of demonic cultivators by herself? How strong is she? When the man who was vomiting blood heard this, his face turned even paler. He didn't dare to cause trouble, and hurriedly stood up with the help of the table and crawled downstairs. Seeing that the man left, the people on the second floor sat down. They didn't provoke her, so they didn't have to leave. After all, Wanyan Qianhua was from the Blue Star Immortal sect, so they didn't have to worry about her killing people. Have you heard? The news has spread and people from all over the world are heading to the Blue Star Immortal sect. I heard that the sect leader of the carefree sect will also bring people over. That's right. During this period of time, the sects have sent many disciples back to their families because they are worried that Sovereign Tong Tian and the others will attack them. But this is also good. At least it's safer to send them back, and they can leave some seedlings for the sections. Sigh. This time I heard that the sects don't have the confidence to fight with Sovereign Tong Tian, but this battle is unavoidable. If they don't fight, they will have to submit to Sovereign Tong Tian and listen to his orders to help him dominate the world. Why do you think the sects will help him? Sovereign Tong Tian is said to be at the Divine King level. Who in the world has the strength to fight with him? Even the sect leaders of the various large sects. None of them have reached the God King level, right? Of course. Do you think that just anyone can reach the God King level? Not to mention that there aren't any in the major sects. It would be difficult to find a few in the various realms. As Wanyan Qianhua listened to those people, his hand that was swirling the wine glass paused. No one knew what he was thinking. He looked at the wine glass in his hand and did not move for a long time. She drank her wine and looked at the streets until the sky gradually darkened. Then she got up and walked out, preparing to find an inn to rest for the night and leave tomorrow. However, just as she left the restaurant and walked through the streets of the city in search of an inn, a cold, killing intent suddenly assaulted her from behind. She stopped in her tracks and turned around abruptly. She saw over a dozen sword-wielding black-clothed men appear on the streets and attack her. Ah! Run! When the commoners on the street saw this, they were so frightened that they cried out in alarm and scattered in all directions. Not long after, the entire street was empty, and only things were scattered messily on the ground. The black-clothed men did not say anything. They just made a hand gesture, and the men surrounded her. Chapter 33:14. The red figure shuttled back and forth among the black-robed men. She was extremely fast and swept past them like a ghost, causing the black-robed men's attacks to miss. A cold light flashed past, and one of the black-robed men fell to the ground with a groan. In the next moment, Wanyan Qianhua's longsword flashed and slashed out. She quickly retreated and put away her longsword. With a flick of her sleeve, something seemed to fly out from her sleeve and rushed towards the black-robed men at an extremely fast speed. Ah! In an instant, the black-robed men struggled and screamed. They all pointed their longswords at each other and started killing each other. It could be seen that the black-robed men's attacks were not as fierce as before. They seemed to be trying to stop something. However, their swords were still pointed at their companions in the end. Wanyan Qianhua looked at this scene expressionlessly. When she saw the concealed evil cultivator's aura being released at this moment, the corners of her lips curled up coldly. She watched as the dozen or so men fell one by one before she turned and left. The commoners and cultivators who were hiding far away saw this scene and couldn't help but be speechless. Some people asked in confusion, why did those evil cultivators suddenly kill each other? What do you know? That Wanyan Qianhua is a member of the Wanyan clan. Do you know what the people of the Wanyan clan are best at? A cultivator said as he rubbed his arms in fear. What are they best at? Someone asked. Controlling ghosts. The Wanyan clan is either good at controlling ghosts or raising ghosts. Their ability to control ghosts is unparalleled. Otherwise, why do you think those people would kill each other for no reason? Hearing this, the surroundings fell silent. They didn't know if it was a psychological effect, but they felt that the streets were cold. Especially with the pervasive smell of blood. It seemed even more eerie. 2 nights later, in a forest, Wanyan Qianhua was resting on a tree. The gloomy forest was very gloomy, but those evil beings didn't dare to come within 10 meters of her. The night was very quiet. Therefore, she could vaguely hear footsteps and voices in the distance. However, sleepiness overwhelmed her, and she didn't pay much attention to it, and fell into a deep sleep. In the second half of the night, she was awakened by the clashing of swords and sabers in battle. She opened her eyes and stared at a certain spot in the forest with an ugly expression. She had been sleeping soundly, but was woken up. The anger in her heart was so strong that the aura on her body became colder. A red figure flew in the direction of the sound like a ghost. It was cold and only a red figure could be seen in the dark. From a distance, it was a terrifying sight. When Wanyan Qianhua arrived at that place and saw the people fighting in front, his eyes flashed. It was actually people from the free and unfettered sect. Her heart trembled. She saw several free and unfettered sect disciples covered in scars being surrounded by devil cultivators. She saw one of the devil cultivators raise his hand and send a fierce palm strike towards one of the free and unfettered sect disciples. She didn't even think about it and rushed out. She pushed the disciple aside and condensed spiritual energy in one hand to meet the devil cultivator. Bang! Chapter 33:15. Puffed. The demonic cultivator fell to the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. After twitching a few times, he lay motionless on the ground and stopped breathing. Seeing this, not only were the disciples of the Xiaorao sect stunned, but the demonic cultivators were also stunned. Miss Wanyan, a disciple, recognized her and was pleasantly surprised. Wanyan Qianhua did not turn around. She only ordered, "Back off." As soon as she finished speaking, she unsheathed her sword, and the red figure dashed forward. Wherever the sword passed, a cold murderous aura gushed out. When the demonic cultivators heard the two words Wanyan, they were shocked. They had no choice. Since Wanyan Qianhua had killed thousands of demonic cultivators, it could be said that their hearts would tremble when they heard this name, especially when they looked at the person in front of them, who was wearing a red dress and was incomparably beautiful. Who else could it be but the female killer Wanyan Qianhua? "Retreat! Quickly retreat!" One of the demonic cultivators said in a trembling voice, and suddenly retreated. However, as soon as he finished speaking, he felt a chill in his throat, and with a groan, he fell to the ground. When the disciples of the Xiaoyao sect saw this scene, they could not help but widen their eyes. They only saw the red figure flash past, but they could not see her moves clearly. They only knew that she was extremely fast in the midst of the demonic cultivators. In a short while, the demonic cultivators all fell to the ground. Hiss! So powerful! The few disciples seemed to have forgotten the pain from the wounds on their bodies. One by one, they opened their eyes wide and sucked in a breath of cold air. Only when they saw Wanyan Qianhua putting away the long sword in his hand and preparing to leave did they suddenly come back to their senses. "Miss Wanyan, please wait." A disciple hurriedly called out to her. "Is there anything else?" Wanyan Qianhua frowned slightly and glanced at them. When she glanced at them, the disciples could not help but shrink back. However, they did not retreat. Instead, they said, "Miss Wanyan, are you going back to the Blue Star Immortal sect?" Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua frowned and looked at them. He said coldly, "If you have something to say, say it. It's like this. We also want to go to the Blue Star Immortal sect, but we have split into several groups. The one with us is the sect leader, but the sect leader has met with an accident and is currently unconscious. This place is still very far from the Blue Star Immortal sect, and we are worried that there will be an ambush by devil cultivators on the way. So we would like to ask Miss Wanyan to protect us and let us safely send the sect leader to the Blue Star Immortal sect." Wanyan Qianhua didn't speak for a long time. He just frowned and stared at the disciple who spoke. No one knew what he was thinking. Because she didn't open her mouth, the disciples couldn't guess what she meant. They cautiously called out, "Miss Wanyan?" Wanyan Qianhua came back to her senses. A dark light flashed across her eyes, and she asked in an inexplicable voice, "You said that your sect leader is unconscious?" "Yes, that's right. Actually, our sect master almost went berserk when he was cultivating some time ago. Later on, he didn't recover. After he arranged things and brought us out, he was ambushed and aggravated his internal injuries. Now he's unconscious. In order to protect our sect master, we took the risk to lure those demonic cultivators away. Luckily, Miss Wanyan saved us." Hearing their words, Wanyan Qianhua didn't know what to think. After a while, he said, "Where is he? Take me to see him." Chapter 33:16. In a simple cave somewhere in the forest, more than 10 disciples of the Xiaoyao sect were guarding outside. Inside the cave, there were 2 or 3 disciples, a middle-aged man, and Junju Shang, who was in a coma. I wonder if they will be in danger? Will they be able to get rid of those demonic cultivators? The disciples guarding outside were worried, looking around from time to time. It's still a long way to the Blue Star Immortal sect. We don't know how many more dangers we will encounter. The disciples lowered their voices, looking worried. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound. The disciples guarding outside looked over and saw a few familiar figures. It's Senior Brother Chun and the others. As soon as they heard the surprised voices, they quickly rushed forward. When they got closer, they saw the bloodstains on their bodies. Their faces changed. Senior Brother Chun, we're fine. Don't worry. Look, who is this? The leader of the disciples said with a smile, gesturing for them to look at Wanyan Qianhua. When they saw them just now, they noticed a red figure beside them. At this moment, the disciples who had seen Wanyan Qianhua before were startled. Miss Wanyan? Yes, it's Miss Wanyan. Fortunately, we met her. Otherwise, I'm afraid we would have died under the swords of those demonic cultivators. Hearing this, everyone immediately saluted Wanyan Qianhua. Thank you for saving us, Miss Wanyan. Wanyan Qianhua looked at them and said, lead the way. Yes, Miss Wanyan, this way. They quickly led her to the cave. After arriving at the cave, only one person brought Wanyan Qianhua in. The others stayed outside and helped the disciples clean their wounds. When the middle-aged man saw Wanyan Qianhua, he couldn't help but be shocked. Miss Wanyan? Why are you here? Wanyan Qianhua looked at him and said indifferently, I was preparing to return to the sect. On the way, I met a few disciples of your sect. As she spoke, she walked in and her eyes fell on the figure lying by the fire. After 5 years, he still looked the same. It was as if he hadn't changed at all. However, because he was unconscious, his face was a little pale, and his eyebrows were slightly furrowed. It seemed that his situation wasn't good. With his cultivation, how did he end up like this? With his cultivation and comprehension, how did he end up like this? This, I don't know. The middle-aged man shook his head. Wanyan Qianhua sat down by the fire and asked, have you taken any medicine? Yes, this morning. I took an internal elixir to treat my internal injuries, but I haven't woken up yet. As the middle-aged man spoke, he looked at the cold Wanyan Qianhua and was secretly surprised. After not seeing her for 5 years, he felt that she had changed a lot. In the past, she was full of smiles and natural charm. Now, although she was still beautiful, she inexplicably made people feel cold. Thinking about the changes in the sect leader and Wanyan Qianhua in the past 5 years, he couldn't help but wonder what happened to them back then. Thinking of this, the middle-aged man asked carefully, Miss Wanyan, we haven't seen each other for 5 years. Have you been well? Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua curled her lips. She glanced at the middle-aged man and said, better than your clan leader. Chapter 33:17. Yes. The few of them replied and turned around to leave. After the few of them left, the middle-aged man said, actually, I'm very happy to be able to meet Miss Wanyan here. Originally, I was worried that the sect master would be unconscious and that the journey would not be peaceful. However, if Miss Wanyan can accompany me, I can still be at ease. As he spoke, he paused and continued, if the sect master knows that Miss Wanyan has come, I think he will be very happy. However, after he spoke, he suddenly felt that the atmosphere in the cave seemed to have become colder, causing him to involuntarily shiver. When his gaze fell on Wanyan Qianhua's face, he saw her coldly looking at him with a smile that was not a smile. That kind of gaze made him unable to say the words that were about to come out of his mouth. He could only smile embarrassedly and said, then let's go out for a walk. Miss Wanyan, you can rest here first. If you need anything, just call us. Without waiting for her to say anything, the middle-aged man stood up and walked out, leaving the two of them alone. The cave was quiet. Only the occasional crackling sound of the branches burning in the fire could be heard. Wanyan Qianhua did not look at the unconscious Junju Shang. Instead, she sat quietly in front of the fire. Looking at the fire, she recalled the words he said to her 5 years ago, as well as the cold and indifferent expression in his eyes. 5 years had already faded away the feelings from back then. She thought that the person she had not seen for 5 years had already faded from her mind. However, when she saw him today, the scenes of the past once again appeared in her mind. Her gaze turned slightly and fell on the unconscious Jun Jushang. Seeing the sweat on his forehead and his frown becoming deeper and deeper, she hesitated for a moment and reached out to check his pulse. After checking his pulse, she knew that his situation was not very good. He said that he had taken a pill, but it seemed that it did not have any effect. Staring at Jun Jushang, she took out the pill that Fengjiu gave her and stuffed one into his mouth. Outside, although the middle-aged man had gone out, he didn't go far. Instead, he sat at the entrance of the cave and glanced inside from time to time. When he saw Wanyan Qianhua take out a pill and feed it to the sect master, he couldn't help but smile. As for Wanyan Qianhua, he naturally did not need to worry or guard against her. He was only afraid that she would really do nothing and ignore him. However, from the looks of it, she should still have their sect leader in her heart. He just did not know what happened back then. He actually let her leave for 5 years? After she fed the pill to Jun Jushang, she was about to withdraw her hand when Jun Jushang grabbed it. She looked at her hand, and her eyes moved. She looked at the person who hadn't even opened his eyes. At the same time, she exerted some strength and tried to withdraw her hand. However, although he was unconscious, his strength was so great that he couldn't pull his hand back. Wanyan Qianhua frowned and used more strength to pull her hand back. She sat at the side with a cold face and didn't look at him again. The night gradually darkened, and the night passed quietly. Wanyan Qianhua closed her eyes and rested, but she didn't let down her guard. Therefore, when the sun rose, she opened her eyes. It's daybreak. Help him out. Wanyan Qianhua came to the entrance of the cave. With a wave of her sleeve, a flying boat appeared in front of her. Chapter 33:18. He's unconscious. It's best to use the flying ship. Let's go. Even if there's an ambush, it won't be too obvious. As she spoke, she jumped onto the flying ship. Not long after, the flying ship slowly ascended in the direction of the Blue Star Immortal Sect. Flying in the clouds, the disciples who had been on tenterhooks all the way finally let out a sigh of relief. At this moment, Jun Jushang, who had been unconscious for a day and a night, slowly opened his eyes. Sect Master is awake, the middle-aged man's surprised voice sounded. He looked at Jun Jushang, who had opened his eyes and secretly let out a sigh of relief. After waking up, Jun Jushang looked at the middle-aged man and asked, "Where is this?" "Sect Master, this is the cabin of the flying ship." "Oh, that's right, this is Miss Wanyan's flying ship. Last night the middle-aged man told him about his encounter with Wanyan Qianhua last night. After hearing the middle-aged man's words, Jun Jushang's gaze slightly moved. He closed his eyes and didn't speak. "Sect Master, last night I saw Miss Wanyan feed you a pill. I reckon that pill took effect. That's why you woke up so quickly." As he spoke, his voice paused. He looked at Jun Jushang and said, "Sect Master, last night after Miss Wanyan fed you the pill, you kept grabbing her hand and didn't let go." Hearing this, Jun Jushang's eyelashes trembled. He didn't speak, but slowly closed his eyes. "Elder Su, did Sect Master wake up?" The disciples outside heard him say that Sect Master woke up, so they came over to ask. "Sect Master, rest first. I'll go out and tell Miss Wanyan and the disciples so that they won't be worried." The middle-aged man said, then stood up and walked out. Outside, Wanyan Qianhua heard that Jun Jushang had woken up. His hand holding the wine cup couldn't help but tighten a bit. Sect Master woke up. His spirit isn't very good. Don't disturb him. Everyone disperse. The middle-aged man said to the disciples outside, hinting them to go to the front. At the same time, he walked to the front of the ship and came to Wanyan Qianhua. "Miss Wanyan, sect leader is awake. Do you want to go in and take a look?" The middle-aged man asked. His gaze fell on her face, and when he saw her cold gaze, he could not help but smile sheepishly. "Pretend I didn't say anything. Pretend I didn't say anything." He chuckled and retreated. Jun Jushang was lying on the bed in the cabin. He opened his eyes. It wasn't clear what he was thinking about. He closed his eyes after a while and fell asleep. After flying for 2 days, seeing that they were getting closer and closer to the Blue Star Immortal sect, Wanyan Qianhua said to the middle-aged man, "Now that your sect master has woken up and is recovering, we are not far from the Blue Star Immortal sect. Let's split up ahead." Hearing this, the middle-aged man was stunned. Isn't Miss Wanyan also going back to the Blue Star Immortal sect? How? I still have some things to do. I'm not in a hurry to go back. Wanyan Qianhua said. He turned around and did not say anything else. Instead, he controlled the ship to fly down. Seeing this, the middle-aged man hurried to the cabin of the ship. "Sect Master, Miss Wanyan said that she wants to split up with us. She won't be going to the immortal sect with us." "Okay," Jun Jushang replied. He, who was leaning against the head of the bed, paused for a moment before standing up and putting on his clothes. Chapter 33:19. Jun Jushang didn't say anything. He put on his robe and walked out of the cabin. His face was still a little pale, but it was much better than a few days ago. At this time he walked out, and every step he took was very slow. The disciples cupped their fists and bowed when they saw him. Then they retreated to the side. Jun Jushang came to the front of the ship. He looked at Wanyan Qianhua, who was leaning on the front of the ship and looking at the sky outside. His eyes flashed. "Thank you." These 2 words came out of his mouth. He didn't say anything else and didn't ask anything. It was just a simple thank you. Wanyan Qianhua didn't move at all. Wanyan Qianhua didn't even look in his direction. Jun Jushang raised his head and looked ahead. He said, "Since we're not on the same path, we can stop and split up." Wanyan Qianhua didn't say anything. However, the ship slowly descended. After about half an hour the ship landed. Wanyan Qianhua, who was leaning lazily, didn't look back. She said to them, "Let's go." These 3 words were cold and emotionless. She didn't even look back at Jun Jushang. Jun Jushang looked at her, then turned around and walked out of the ship. "Miss Wanyan, take care. We'll see you at the sect." The disciples cupped their fists and said. They then walked out of the ship and stood behind Jun Jushang. The middle-aged man walked over and chuckled. "Miss Wanyan, we'll meet again at the sect. Thank you for taking care of me along the way." As he spoke, he cupped his hands and bowed before getting off the flying ship. After they got out of the ship, it flew into the sky again and gradually went away. The middle-aged man looked at Jun Jushang and asked carefully, "Sect leader, what happened between you and Miss Wanyan? Why didn't she look at you?" Jun Jushang didn't say anything. He just put his hands behind his back and rode his sword forward. Seeing this, the others quickly followed. On the spaceship, Wanyan Qianhua took out some wine from her space. She leaned back and drank 1 cup after another. When the spaceship arrived outside Four Corner City, she came down from the spaceship. She put away the spaceship and walked towards the city with swaying steps. After entering the city, she randomly pulled someone and asked, "How do I get to the Feng residence?" Feng residence? The one who was stopped was a male cultivator. He had originally thought that this red-clothed woman's beauty was unparalleled, and he was looking at her with amazement. When he heard her mention the words Feng Manor, the amazement in his eyes immediately disappeared, and he looked at her with a bit of vigilance. "Who are you? Why do you want to go to the Feng residence?" Wanyan Qianhua frowned, especially after drinking wine. He was a little unhappy. Hearing his words, he immediately grabbed his collar and lifted him up. He shouted coldly, "Didn't you hear me? How do I get to the Feng residence?" A powerful pressure came over, causing the male cultivator's face to turn pale. Not to mention speaking, he couldn't even move. Wanyan Qianhua, who had recovered, rubbed her brow. She withdrew the pressure and put the person down, saying, "I am Wanyan Qianhua. I want to go to the Feng residence. Lead the way." As soon as they heard that it was Wanyan Qianhua, the people who were paying attention to this side began to whisper. "So she is Wanyan Qianhua. I never thought that she would be this beautiful. I heard that she and Fengjiu are sworn sisters." Chapter 33:20. When Jun Jushang and the others entered the city, they saw the red silhouette from afar. They saw a tall man wearing black clothes walking towards her. They didn't know what he was talking to her about. After that, the man in black clothes let go of the cultivator she was holding and helped her walk away. When Junju Shang saw the two of them leave, his eyes twitched and he lowered his head. Who is that person? Why is he helping young Miss Wanyan leave? A disciple said as he looked at Wanyan Qianhua leaning on the black-robed man. It seems that the relationship between the two is not ordinary. Perhaps he is young Miss Wanyan's sweetheart? Another disciple said. As he spoke, his foot was stepped on, and he couldn't help but cry out. He glared at the disciple next to him. Why did you step on me? Seeing the sect master walk forward, the middle-aged man turned around and glared at them. The disciple who had stepped on him unhappily said, What did you say wrong? Why did you have to say that? Could it be that you didn't know that young Miss Wanyan lived in the sect master's bamboo forest for a period of time 5 years ago? Her relationship with the sect master is not shallow? Now that you're talking about the relationship between young Miss Wanyan and that man in front of the sect master, how do you want the sect master to feel? Hearing this, the disciple was stunned. He scratched his head and said, I didn't know. When she went, I wasn't at the sect. After that, I didn't hear anyone mention it. How could I know there was such a thing? He only knew that young Miss Wanyan seemed to have some relationship with their sect. How could he have known that the relationship was like this? Enough, let's go. As they spoke, they quickly followed Junju Shang and the others. On the other side, Guan Shilin helped Wanyan Qianhua back to the Feng Manor. Upon entering the manor, he called for 2 servant girls. Help her to the inner courtyard to rest. As he spoke, he looked at Wanyan Qianhua. You go rest first. I'll have someone make some hangover soup for you. Wanyan Qianhua complied, and walked to the courtyard with the help of the 2 servant girls. Actually, she wasn't that drunk. It was just that she wasn't in a good mood. Coupled with the fact that she was drunk, her temples hurt a little, and she didn't have much energy left. The servants in the mansion were sent by the Xiao family. Guan Shilin lived here, so it was more convenient for some servants to move around. Therefore, he sent someone to the kitchen to make some hangover soup for Wanyan Qianhua. Not long after Wanyan Qianhua entered the Feng Manor, Du Fan and the others arrived at the manor's entrance. Seeing the familiar place, they looked at each other and smiled. Speaking of which, we haven't been back for 5 years. Du Fan looked inside and couldn't help but sigh. These 5 years had passed so quickly. Yes, it's been 5 years and we're back. Old Mei's eyes narrowed as he smiled. When he thought of Fengjiu's return, and the young master's return, he was filled with excitement. He wondered how the young master was doing now that 5 years had passed. Qin Xian saw that there were people walking around the manor and said, Let's go in. Before the young master returns, everything in the manor needs to be prepared. That's true. As they spoke, they walked inside. When the servant girls inside saw them, they couldn't help but be startled. Just as they were about to ask, they saw Guan Shilin walk out. Seeing them, he laughed and greeted them. Chapter 33-21. When his gaze landed on Elder Mei and Qin Xian, he was slightly surprised, but he did not say anything. He only indicated for them to come in, and the group walked towards the main hall. After everyone sat down, Du Fan smiled and introduced them. Shilin, this is Elder Mei, and this is Qin Xian. As he spoke, he turned to the two and said, This is Guan Shilin, Master's sworn brother. He has a very good relationship with Master. Hearing Du Fan's words, Elder Mei's eyes flashed. Du Fan said that the person in front of them was Fengjiu's sworn brother. And he also said that Guan Shilin had a very good relationship with Fengjiu. It could be seen that he was not a person that could not be ignored. At that moment, he also took him seriously and cupped his hands in greeting. Brother Guan. Greetings, big brother Guan. Qin Xian also stepped forward and bowed. We're all family. No need to be so polite. As Guan Shilin spoke, he indicated for them to sit down and said, I've been here for a few days now, and I've been waiting for you all. Du Fan and Luo Yu looked at each other and smiled when they heard this, saying, As soon as we heard that you had come, we ordered our subordinates to inquire about you. Who would have thought that you would directly come to the Feng Manor? I more or less know about your situation here. That Sovereign Lord Tong Tian is indeed a difficult person to deal with. However, after 5 years, Xiao Jiao and the others should have become much stronger. Speaking to this point, Guan Shilin smiled. Especially since the various large sects have been preparing to deal with Sovereign Lord Tong Tian. With this kind of help, I trust that Sovereign Lord Tong Tian will have to think twice before making a move. Right now, Master and the others have not returned yet. We can use this opportunity to make arrangements in the manor, Du Fan said. Hearing this, Guan Shilin continued. That's right, before you came, I just happened to run into Xiao Jiao's sworn sister, Wanyan Qianhua. At this time, she is also in the manor. However, I saw that she was not feeling too well, so I had her rest in the back courtyard. Oh, she's here too? When they heard this, they couldn't help but smile. Then if Master comes back, he will definitely be very happy to see you. Since Leng Hua isn't here, I can only act as the housekeeper for now. I have to send someone to inform the Xiao family and set up some formations in the mansion. You guys take a seat first. I'm going to get busy. Du Fan stood up and said to everyone. Hearing this, Old May and the rest stood up as well. We stood up as well. Let's go and help as well. We need to arrange for some people to come back. After all, it's not good for the Xiao family to move around here. Thus, they didn't sit down, but started to get busy. In the evening, when the sky was getting dark, Guan Shilin called Du Fan to the backyard and asked him about it. Du Fan, Old May's cultivation is extraordinary. How did Xiao Jiao subdue him? Guan Shilin asked the question that had been bothering him. Today, he saw that Old May's cultivation was unfathomable, and he couldn't ask in detail, because there were too many people around. Now he had the time to ask clearly. Haha, even if you didn't come to me, I was going to come to you and tell you. Chapter 33:22. Hearing this, Guan Shilin nodded his head. I understand. Because everyone was gathered, Guan Shilin had the kitchen prepare a table full of food and wine. Tonight, they would sit down and eat a good meal together. Night fell, and the manor's lights were as bright as day. Tonight, everyone in the Feng Manor gathered. This allowed the various families and factions in Xifang City to know that Fengjiu and the others who had disappeared for 5 years were about to return. However, Fengjiu and the others had not yet appeared. Today, however, some people saw that the people who had followed Fengjiu in the past had entered the city. Inside the Feng Manor, Qin Xian arrived at Wanyan Qianhua's courtyard and knocked on the door. Young Miss Wanyan, are you feeling better? Wanyan Qianhua was lying on the bed. When she heard the sound from outside, she rubbed her forehead and opened her eyes. She did not get up and instead asked, What is it? Young Miss Wanyan, I am Qin Xian. We just arrived at the Feng Manor today. Everyone is gathering in the front. Brother Guan told me to come ask if you are feeling better. Do you want to go to the front together? Hearing this, Wanyan Qianhua rubbed her forehead and sat up saying, I will go over in a bit. As she spoke, she washed her face, combed her hair, and put on her outer clothes before walking out. She originally thought that Qin Xian, who had been talking outside, had already left. She never thought that when she opened the door, she would see her waiting in the courtyard. Young Miss Wanyan. Qin Xian bowed slightly. When she saw Wanyan Qianhua, she thought that she had seen her master. However, when she looked carefully, she felt that although the two were both wearing red clothes, their temperaments were different. However, it could not be denied that Wanyan Qianhua's beauty was very captivating. Wanyan Qianhua looked her over and asked, You are one of Xiao Jiao's people? Yes, she replied and retreated to the side to let her go first. Let's go, Wanyan Qianhua said and walked to the front with her. In the front yard, Guan Shilin and the others put the tables together and placed them in the middle of the yard. There were lanterns hanging around the tables, and when one looked up, they could see the bright moon. Everyone stood in small groups and chatted. Since Wanyan Qianhua had not arrived yet, they did not sit down. When they saw Wanyan Qianhua and Qin Xian out of the corner of their eyes, they smiled and said, They're here, they're here. Everyone walked towards Wanyan Qianhua and cupped their fists to salute her. Miss Wanyan, long time no see. Du Fan smiled. Looking at them, Wanyan Qianhua smiled. Yes, it's been a long time. Have a seat, she said and gestured for everyone to sit. We were just talking about how Miss Wanyan single-handedly annihilated over 1,000 demonic cultivators. How satisfying. It's already in the past. There's nothing to talk about. Wanyan Qianhua said and looked at them with a smile. You guys, on the other hand, disappeared for 5 years. Now that you've reappeared, I'm sure Xiaojiu will be back soon. I heard from Leng Hua that Master is still in closed-door cultivation. She'll probably come back after she comes out, but I believe it won't take long. I heard from Leng Hua that if Master breaks through again, she'll break through to the Divine King realm. Once she breaks through to the Divine King realm, she'll be able to fight against the sovereign of Tongtian. Du Fan said excitedly. Master and the Yama Lord's breakthroughs were unbelievably fast. In 5 years, they would break through to the Divine King realm. No, to be exact, the Yama Lord had already broken through. Only Master was left. Chapter 33-23. I haven't been back to the sect for 5 years. Now that the sect is in danger, I have to go back and see my master. With that, Wanyan Qianhua raised his wine glass and said, Come, let's not go home until we're drunk tonight. As for tomorrow, I have to go back first. I'll come back when Xiaojiu and the rest are back. Hearing that, everyone raised their wine glasses and said, Let's not go home until we're drunk. That night, everyone chatted and laughed as they drank. They only left when it was late at night, and returned to their courtyards to rest. Meanwhile, in Danwang Valley, 3 bolts of lightning struck down from the sky. Each bolt was more powerful than the last. Hearing the rumbling of the lightning, the cultivators in the valley all came out of their cave abodes to take a look. Look, it's the young Valley Master. The young Valley Master has finally broken through to the Godly King level. I never thought that I would be able to see the young Valley Master break through to the Godly King level with my own eyes. Ha 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 ha, my life has not been in vain. The cultivators laughed excitedly as they looked at the 7 colored clouds in the originally dark sky. They watched as the night turned into day. They watched as the 7 colored clouds floated in the sky. Faintly, they could hear the sound of red-crowned cranes and heavenly music coming from the depths of the clouds. Look, that's the fire phoenix. With a phoenix cry, the fire phoenix flapped her wings and flew into the sky. She circled in the sky. Her entire body was covered in flames, and her long and gorgeous phoenix tail was hanging down from her tail. Everyone couldn't help but gasp in amazement. So beautiful. Not far from the cave abode where Fengjiu had broken through, Xianyuan Mo stood with his hands behind his back. Hao who was dressed in a small black robe, stood beside him. The little boy looked up at the sky, his eyes full of excitement. Father, Mother is so powerful. The fire phoenix is so beautiful. Be good and listen to us. Work hard in your cultivation. You can be so powerful in the future. Xianyuan Mo said as he reached out to pat his son's head. Thinking about his son's background, a dark light flashed across his eyes. Father, how will listen to father and mother's words and cultivate diligently. I want to be as powerful as you two in the future. He looked up at him. In his heart, the two of them had always been very powerful. They had always been the strongest. Xianyuan Mose looked at him and didn't say anything. No one knew what he was thinking. Father, will Mother come out after she finishes her advancement? Father, Mother has come out. Are we going to leave this place? He asked curiously. Xianyuan Mose smiled and asked, Do you want to leave this place? Hao blinked, thought for a moment and said, I want to follow Father and Mother. Hao will go wherever Father and Mother go. Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose sighed in his heart. He rubbed his head and said, It's late, go back to sleep. When you wake up, you can see your mother tomorrow. Hearing this, his eyes lit up. All right, then will Daddy also go back to sleep? You go back first, I'll go back later. He gestured and said, Go. Hao replied before walking towards the cave abode. After Hao left, Dan Wang stroked his beard and walked over with a smile. That girl has finally broken through. I wonder what Order God King cultivation she is now. He looked at Xianyuan Mose and asked, Is there something on your mind? Chapter 33:24. Hearing this, Dan Wang's hand that was stroking his beard paused. He pondered for a moment, then said, "If his parents are still alive and have the ability to protect him, then he should indeed return to his birth parents. Although he is only 6 years old, he has been intelligent since he was a child. When the time comes, you can talk to him and see what he thinks. Regarding his past, you can't hide it from him forever." We didn't want to hide it from him forever. We originally planned to tell him when we were about to leave. As Xin Yuanmo spoke, he watched the 7-colored clouds in the sky gradually disperse. The night returned to normal, and the stars shone in the sky. "It's getting late. Fengjiu probably won't come out until tomorrow. You should go back and rest too," Dan Wang said, then walked away with his hands behind his back. After Dan Wang left, Xin Yuanmo also walked away and returned to his cave to rest. The next day, as soon as the sky brightened, he got up and went outside to wait for Fengjiu to come out. In the cave, Fengjiu exhaled softly, then slowly opened her eyes. The moment she opened her eyes, a faint smile appeared on her face. She had finally succeeded in becoming a divine king expert. In the past 5 years, apart from her master guiding their cultivation, he had also researched and concocted pills for advancement with her. Otherwise, she and Mose wouldn't have been able to break through to the divine king level in just 5 years. Sitting cross-legged, she released her divine sense and saw the people waiting for her outside the cave. When she saw them, the smile on her face deepened. Only then did she get up and walk out. "Father, when is mother coming out?" Howard asked, holding Xianyuan Mose's hand. His eyes occasionally glanced towards the cave. "She'll be out in a while," Xianyuan Mose said, his gaze falling on the cave. Leng Hua and the others also looked towards the cave. They couldn't hide their excitement. Master was finally coming out of seclusion. Not long after, a red figure walked out from inside and appeared in front of everyone. Everyone's eyes lit up when they saw the beautiful woman in red with her hair hanging down to her hips. "Mother!" Hao ran over happily and threw himself at Fengjiu. Fengjiu bent down and picked him up. He smiled and said, "Hao has grown taller again." "Mother, Hao misses you." He intimately hugged her neck, his delicate little face flushed red. The little man buried his head in her neck, unwilling to leave. When Fengjiu heard this, and saw that he was hugging him tightly, he also laughed. "Mother, I miss Hao. Congratulations, Master, for successfully breaking through to the God King realm." Leng Hua and the others stepped forward and bowed respectfully as they congratulated him. When the other people in the valley saw this, they smiled and congratulated. "Congratulations, young Valley Master. Congratulations, young Valley Master." "Ha ha, little girl, not bad." Dan Wang smiled and nodded. He looked at her with satisfaction. "Master," Fengjiu called out and said, "if not for Master's guidance, I wouldn't have advanced so quickly. It's all because of Liang Zun that I'm where I am today." When Dan Wang heard this, he waved his hand. "Sai, this has nothing to do with me. It's all because of you, one step at a time." Then he said to everyone, "Today the valley has to celebrate. Everyone get ready. Later, we'll dig out all the wine that little Feng brewed a few years ago to drink." Chapter 33:25. Let's go dig for wine. Let's go help in the kitchen. They all spoke excitedly. After cupping their hands, they left, leaving only the few of them there. "Master Yama Lord, let's go help," Leng Hua said. He left with Hui Lang and the others. "Little Master, I'll take you to see them dig for wine," Leng Shuang said. He came to Fengjiu and looked at Hao. Hao looked at his mother and then at his father. Then he said to Fengjiu, "Mother, I'll go play with Aunt Shuang first." He got down from Fengjiu's arms and held Leng Shuang's hand. He looked at Xianyuan Mose and said, "Father, Hao will come back later." "Go." Xianyuan Mose nodded. Fengjiu came to his side and wrapped his arms around his waist. She hugged him and buried her face in his chest. She smiled and said, "I've been in seclusion for more than a year. Did you miss me?" Xianyuan Mose hugged her and rested his chin on her head. He smiled and said, "Yes." One word was better than 1,000 words. They stood in each other's arms and didn't say anything. They just quietly enjoyed the warmth of this moment. After a long time, they let go. Xianyuan held her hand and looked into the distance. He said, "Now that you're out, we have to find a time to leave." Du Fan and the others sent news that the situation outside isn't very good, especially since Sovereign Tong Tian wants to attack the big sections. The situation outside is very dangerous. 5 years have passed. I wonder how much Sovereign Tongtian's strength has improved, Fengjie said thoughtfully. He still had the ancient fierce beasts by his side. If they fought, they wouldn't be completely overwhelmed. We can discuss this after we get out of here. What do you plan to do about Hauer? Xianyuan looked at her and asked. Hearing this, Fengjie paused for a moment and said, Hauer is already 6 years old. If we didn't know who his biological parents were, we wouldn't be in a hurry to tell him since he has been raised by us. But since we know his background, we should tell him before we leave Danwang Valley. Xianyuan nodded. Yes, I think so too. 5 years have passed. I think Elder Mei will want to bring him back this time. Fengjie smiled and said, In any case, we have raised him for 5 or 6 years. If you want to take him away from us, if his parents don't come personally, then you won't be able to take him away. She had raised her son for 5 or 6 years. How could she let anyone take him away so easily? If his parents didn't come in person, she didn't want to return their son to them. Listening to her words, Xianyuan hooked his lips and smiled. That's right, we have raised our son for 5 or 6 years. How can they take him back so easily? Let's go. We'll go to the stream at the back of the mountain to watch them dig for wine. As for Hauer's background, we'll tell him at night. Fengjie said as she held his hand and led him to the back of the mountain. On this day, because Fengjie had come out of seclusion, everyone in the valley was very happy. Everyone got busy. The valley hadn't been so happy and lively in a long time. It could be said that no one was idle from morning to evening. At night, the table was filled with food and wine. Everyone sat around and drank together. It was a harmonious scene. There were no disputes, no robberies and killings outside. There was only peace and ordinary. Chapter 33:26. Mother, look at those 2 stars. They're so bright. Hao pointed at 2 unusually bright stars in the sky. Xianyuan and Fengjie looked up and smiled at each other. Those 2 stars were the Emperor Star and the Phoenix Star. Although they were bright in the past, they were never as dazzling as tonight. If they could see that the Emperor Star and the Phoenix Star were so dazzling, others probably noticed as well. Hao, your father and I have something to tell you tonight. You have to listen carefully. Fengjie looked at him and said seriously. Hearing this, Hauer blinked. Seeing the rare seriousness on their faces, he couldn't help but sit up straight and nod seriously. Yes, Hauer will listen carefully. Xianyuan and Fengjie looked at each other and paused. In the end, they decided that she should be the one to speak. She looked at Hauer, who was sitting between them, and said softly, Hauer, we're actually not your biological parents. Hearing this, Hauer, who was sitting up straight, froze. His eyes widened, and he looked at Fengjie in astonishment. Mother, what did you say? Hauer, we're not your biological parents. Fengjie looked at his panicked expression and her heart clenched. Mother, are you drunk? Hauer's eyes were filled with panic and fear. His eyes gradually turned red, and a layer of mist covered them. His small hands tightly grasped her hand. Mother, are you drunk? Hauer is your biological son. Hauer is your biological son. As he spoke, his tears fell. His little mouth was tightly pursed, and he forced himself not to cry. It was the first time such a small person faced such a situation. For a moment, it felt as if the entire sky had collapsed. He was very panicked and helpless. A pair of hands gently stroked his head and pulled him into an embrace. Fengjie sighed softly and said softly, Hauer, don't cry. It's all right. Even if you're not our biological son, you're still our son. Feeling the warmth of his mother's embrace, feeling the gentleness from her body, his panicked heart gradually calmed down. He raised his head and hugged her tightly. His voice choked as he asked, Really? Mother, even if Hauer isn't father and mother's biological son, will father and mother still want me? You're the son we've raised for 5 or 6 years. How could we not want you? As Xianyuan Mo spoke, he reached out his hand to rub his hair and said, "Your mother and I are telling you this because we want you to know your background. After we leave Dan Wang Valley this time, perhaps not long after, your birth parents will come knocking on our door. I don't want them. I only want you," Hao hurriedly said and buried himself in Fengjiu's arms. When the two saw this, they couldn't help but shake their heads and smile. "Hao, don't you want to know how you became our son?" Hearing this, Hao blinked his slightly red eyes. He thought for a moment and sat up straight. However, one hand was still tightly holding Fengjiu's hand. He said, "I want to know. Mother, where did Hao come from?" Chapter 33:27. Seeing him in a daze, Fengjiu couldn't help but laugh. "Your father and I didn't have children yet, so we raised you as our own. As we raised you, you're already so big. At first, we didn't know about your background, but later, an old man came to our house. He's called Elder Mei. Fengjiu hugged him and told him about him bit by bit. Hao leaned in her arms and listened attentively until she finished. "That's it. So, when we leave Dan Wang Valley in a few days, we have to tell you about your background first. Do you understand now? It's not that father and mother don't want you. Even if we tell you this, you're still our son," Fengjiu said softly. She looked at Hao, who had calmed down with a smile in her eyes. It was indeed not easy for a 6-year-old child to calm down so quickly. "Mother, after leaving Dan Wang Valley, Hao only wants to stay by father and mother's side. He didn't know his biological parents. Ever since he could remember, father and mother had been by his side. They taught him how to walk, how to speak, how to read, and how to cultivate. He knew that they had always doted on him, so he never doubted that he wasn't their biological son." Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu smiled and said, "We'll talk about this later. It's late, go back and sleep." As they spoke, they stood up and each of them took one of his hands to send him back to his cave residence to rest. After sending him back to his cave residence, the two of them went to the hot spring pool in Dan Wang Valley. They planned to take a bath before going back to rest. In the middle of the night, the valley was already quiet. Only the occasional sound of insects could be heard in the air. The two of them took a bath in the hot spring. After about the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, they got up and went back to their cave residence. What they didn't know was that Hao couldn't sleep that night. He couldn't sleep the whole night. His mind kept thinking about the things they told him. He digested the things they told him alone and couldn't fall asleep until dawn. In the end, he got up early, washed up, and went to sit outside his parents' cave residence alone, waiting for them to wake up. "Hao, why are you here?" Early in the morning, Leng Hua saw the little figure curled up into a ball and sitting in front of his master's cave. He immediately walked over to him and asked, "Uncle Hua." Hao looked up at him and then lowered his head again. He buried his head between his knees and said in a muffled voice, "Father and mother told Hao that Hao is not their biological son." Leng Hua was slightly startled when he heard this, and then he smiled warmly. "Hao, do your parents treat you well?" "All right, father and mother treat Hao the best. They love Hao the most." He raised his head and said, "That's right. All these years, they've been so good to you, treating you like their own son." "So what if you're not their biological son? You just need to know that they're good to you, right?" Hao thought for a moment and nodded. "Yes, mother said so too. Mother and father said that I'm still their son. Isn't that enough? No matter what, you're still their son. That won't change." Leng Hua patted his head and said warmly, "You're sitting here so early in the morning. If your mother comes out and sees you, her heart will ache." Chapter 33:28. Hearing this, Leng Hua smiled warmly and said, "Let's go. I'll take you to eat something." Leng Hua took his hand and led him to the kitchen to see if there was anything for him to eat. As the sky gradually brightened, the first ray of sunlight shone into the valley. At the stone table in the kitchen, Leng Hua sat at the table and looked at Hao's flushed face from drinking hot porridge. He couldn't help but smile. "Uncle Hua, mother said that we're leaving Dan Wang Valley. Will we come back in the future?" Hao put down his spoon and looked at him. He grew up here and liked the people here very much. He just didn't know if he could come back in the future. If you want to come back in the future, let your mother bring you back to stay for a few days. Leng Hua said. However, the outside world is more exciting. Maybe you'll like it more after you go out. Is it fun outside? Father doesn't allow me to be playful. I want to cultivate. Howard blinked and asked, Uncle Hua, are there a lot of bad people outside? Leng Hua smiled and said warmly, there are bad people and good people. You have to learn to distinguish them yourself. Uncle Hua, tell me about the outside world. He sat up straight and looked at him with a pair of clear eyes. Okay, he said warmly. He sat here and told him about the outside world. When it was close to noon, they were heading back and happened to meet Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu. Father, mother. Howard trotted forward. Howard, have you eaten? Fengjiu rubbed his hair and asked with a smile. Yes, he said and looked at the two of them. Father, mother, when are we leaving? Uncle Hua said that there are a lot of fun and delicious things outside. In the future, can Howard play enough before cultivating? Hearing this, the two of them looked at each other and smiled. Of course. When we reach our house, Mother will accompany Howard to play outside and eat delicious food. Great. Thank you, Mother. He hugged her hand and smiled happily. At this moment, Fengjiu looked at Leng Hua and said, Go and get them ready. We'll leave soon. Yes, he replied and left first. Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu brought Howard to eat first. Not long after, they came to Dan Wang's cave residence. Young Valley Master, you're here. The Valley Master is inside. The two cultivators guarding the cave said, and invited them in. The two of them nodded and walked inside. When they arrived, they saw Dan Wang sitting at the stone table drinking tea. Seeing that they had arrived, he gestured for them to sit down. Are you guys leaving? Dan Wang asked, his gaze falling on them. Master, we're here to say goodbye. We're preparing to leave soon. Fengjiu said and sat down with Xianyuan Mose and Hao. Dan Wang nodded. That's good. You'll have to leave sooner or later. It's fine to go back earlier. However, when you go back this time, you should also be preparing for your wedding, right? A smile appeared on Xianyuan Mose's face. He glanced at Fengjiu and said, Yes, after we go back and arrange everything, we'll prepare for our wedding. When the time comes, we'll send the invitation. Chapter 33-29. Fengjiu and Xianyuan Mose stood up at the same time and solemnly bowed to him. Take care. Grandpa, Howard will come back to see you in the future, Howard said, imitating them and bowing respectfully. Good. Dan Wang smiled and nodded, gently patting him on the shoulder. Good boy. Remember to listen to your parents and cultivate hard. Grandpa, don't worry. Howard will be obedient, he promised with a serious face. Dan Wang sent them out and said, I'm old and can't bear to part. I won't send you off. You can go on your own. Master, take care, Fengjiu said, then left with Xianyuan Mose with Howard. They went back to their cave and simply packed up. The group went to the grassy area. Xianyuan Mose formed a seal with his hands and drew in the air. A whirlpool appeared. Let's go. He looked at Leng Hua and the others, motioning for them to go in first. Leng Hua and Leng Shuang went in first, followed by Hui Lang and Ying Yi. Fengjiu carried Hao and Xianyuan Mose into the whirlpool together. With a flash of light, the whirlpool disappeared. Along with them, they also disappeared from Dan Wang's valley. In the evening, a purple gold spirit deer carriage sped along the mountain path. It was so fast that it looked like it was flying. However, although the purple gold spirit deer could fly, they didn't fly into the air. Instead, they ran on the ground, stirring up a cloud of dust. Leng Hua and Leng Shuang sat in the front, driving the purple gold spirit deer carriage. In the dark, Hui Lang and Ying Yi followed. Along the way, the cultivators automatically made way, not daring to block them. When a group of mercenaries saw the violet gold spirit deer carriage galloping towards them, some of them widened their eyes, while others gasped. Only the leader of the mercenaries suddenly came back to his senses. He quickly shouted in a low voice and ordered them to make way. After the spirit deer carriage flew past them, a mercenary asked, Captain, those two are purple gold spirit deer. right? Am I seeing things? Is that really the purple gold spirit deer? Purple gold spirit deer? Using the purple gold spirit deer to pull the carriage? Who is the person sitting inside? Purple gold spirit deer are extremely rare. It shouldn't be difficult to know the identity of the people inside the carriage. As the team members spoke, they all looked at their captain in unison. Captain, do you know who's inside? The mercenary leader pondered and said, I've heard that the master of the two venerables of the Blue Star Immortal sect is Fengjiu, the ghost doctor. Back then, they offered 2 purple gold spirit deer to their master. The leader said, frowning, It's just that the ghost doctor Fengjiu has been missing for 5 years. There's been no news of her. How could she suddenly appear? But if it's not her, then who could it be? They're heading towards Four Corner City. Maybe it's really the ghost doctor Fengjiu. Now that the various sects are gathering experts to help, they're going to fight the sovereign of heaven reaching. Maybe the ghost doctor Fengjiu heard the news and rushed back? Chapter 33:30. While they were discussing, the spirit deer carriage had already disappeared without a trace. Even the dust that was kicked up along the way gradually dissipated. The next morning, when Fengjiu's purple gold spirit deer carriage appeared in Four Corner City, almost all of the family clans in Four Corner City were shocked. What? Purple gold spirit deer carriage? Could it be that the ghost doctor Fengjiu and the others have returned? Quick! Send people to ask around. See if they've returned. Every family and faction sent people out to ask around. After hearing the news, they could not sit still. They wanted to go check out the situation. But because they did not have any relations with the Feng Manor, they could not find a reason to visit. As a result, the Xiao family became the target of everyone's inquiries. Xiao Manor. When the head of the Xiao family heard that the purple gold spirit deer carriage had appeared in Four Corner City, his first thought was that Fengjiu and the others had returned. She couldn't sit still any longer. She got someone to prepare a gift and brought her 2 sons to pay a visit. At this time, in the Feng Manor, Du Fan and the others found out that Fengjiu had returned today. They waited outside the manor early in the morning, especially Elder Mei, who was extremely excited. He opened the gates before dawn and waited outside for them to return. Haha, that's great. Xiao Jiao and the others have finally returned. I'm really looking forward to it. Guan Shilin's clear voice came from inside the manor, as he ordered Qin Xian. Tell the kitchen to prepare. Xiao Jiao and the others will definitely want to eat when they return. Prepare some dishes that they like to eat. Qin Xian also revealed a smile and said, Big brother Guan, don't worry. The kitchen has been busy since before dawn. We're just waiting for Master and the others to return. Has the courtyard been tidied up? Guan Shilin worriedly asked. It's already been tidied up. We can move in at any time. Qin Xian said. Then that's good. Let's go. We'll go outside and wait for them. Guan Shilin said, as he walked outside. Luo Yu and the others craned their necks and waited at the gate. When they saw the familiar purple gold spirit deer carriage slowly approaching, they immediately smiled happily. It's here, it's here. Master and the others are here. The crowd gathered outside the mansion. Even some other people were watching from a distance. Their eyes fell on the spirit deer carriage. Only when the spirit deer carriage stopped did they start to whisper. They've been gone for 5 years. I didn't expect them to come back. Yes, I thought they wouldn't come back. I didn't expect this. It's just that 5 years have passed. I wonder if their strength has become stronger? That's for sure. It's just that we don't know how strong they are. As these people were talking in low voices, they saw Leng Shuang and Leng Hua, who were sitting in front of the spirit deer carriage, getting off the carriage first. Everyone in front of the mansion's gate went up to greet them. Leng Hua, you're finally back. Leng Shuang, I haven't seen you in 5 years. You haven't changed at all. Du Fan and the others said happily. After greeting the 2 of them, they looked at the carriage. At this time, Leng Hua and Leng Shuang nodded to the crowd and lifted the curtain of the carriage. Yama Lord Master, we've arrived at the gate. After the curtain of the carriage was lifted, everyone immediately saluted respectfully. Yama Lord Master. In the carriage, the 3 people sitting inside looked outside. Xianyuan Mose got up and walked out first. Then he stood beside the carriage and held Fengjiu's hand. As for Hao he was carried down by Leng Shuang. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.